were initially driven by the industry mandates. So one may remember that about 20 years back or so, we used to have paper tickets, and the first thing which went in is actually an e-ticket. So it's an electronic form of the ticket that you see. Automation plus integrating different processes, training people, and of course, there is a shift in the culture of the organization.
As a CIO across different airline models, across different regions for that matter, right from low cost, full service to a startup luxury as well. From your standpoint, how has the role of CIO today? They are wearing multiple hats. How has it evolved over the years?
You need to build that ecosystem. You need to look at the business processes which needs to be engineered, re-engineered, building the landscape, building the ecosystem, training the people, re-engineering the business processes, and for which an in-depth business knowledge is mandatory.
Hi everyone, I am Simran Shiwalkar, your host for today, and this is an exclusive Leadership Dialogue Middle East edition, and we are back with a new episode. Today, I am particularly thrilled to be joined by yet another visionary leader, Mr. Sourav Sinha. Firstly, sir, thank you so much for being a part of this dialogue and agreeing to do this with us.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely. To begin with, he's a seasoned technology and business leader with more than 3 decades of experience across digital transformation and global aviation. Currently, as the Chief Information Officer at Flynas, he's also led large-scale IT and decision science programs at Qatar Airways, Indigo, Oman Air, Kingfisher Airlines, and beyond, with deep expertise in airline technology, customer experience, and data-led operational excellence. He has also led several teams and also overseen a lot of digital transformation initiatives. This gives me immense pleasure to have this dialogue with him today. So, without any further ado, let's begin. Firstly, Mr. Sinha, thank you so much for joining us. And like I said, more than 3 decades of experience across the tech industry, across aviation ecosystem as well. How has this journey been? Can you give us a glimpse?
Having me here, it's been a pleasure to be part of this initiative of yours. From my career perspective, I have about 35 years of experience now, of which the first 13 years has been in the technology consulting area with Tata Consultancy Services for about 13 years plus. And thereafter, I joined the aviation industry, and my first job was AIO for Qatar Airways. And then I moved from one airline to the other, including low cost as well as full service. And not to mention, even me along with we launched an airline which was beyond, and it was having a different business model altogether. It was a luxury airline for leisure. So that was very different from what I have been doing now and what I have done in the past, but definitely added quite a bit of impetus to my career and my knowledge base. That's kind of brief on what I have done over the last 3 decades.
Thank you so much for giving us your wonderful transformative journey. And with that being said, you've been associated with a lot of airline brands, with a lot of airlines in India and in the Middle East. And digital today is touch basing almost every field. So, what is the digital first growth from your point of view, from your perspective as a leader? What has been the shift that you've been observing a couple of years before and, compared to what the scenario is now?
Some of these initiatives were initially driven by the industry mandates. So one may remember that about 20 years back or so, we used to have paper tickets, and the first thing which went in is actually an e-ticket. So it's an electronic form of the ticket that you see. So this was a mandate from the industry, from IATA, and that started somewhere in early 2000, while in Qatar Airways, we implemented it in 2005, 2006, and thereon, which paved the way for digitizing or automating different aspects of the business. Now, we have to remember that, the airline industry works on a very, very thin margin, quite different from other industries, and also is highly complex and regulated. Safety for us is of the importance. That comes always as the top priority for any airlines. And the nature of the business has been such that it was required one could be because it was a low margin, it was a complex business, highly regulated business. So obviously the demand for automation to start off with, this was in late 2009, 2010, where people started automating several business processes, business initiatives, and so on and so forth. Although we historically had a ticketing and reservation system, but that was only for the reservation and ticketing and probably departure control system at the airport. But then the ecosystem was enhanced to include other areas as well because they were mostly manual operations. So to drive consistency, to improve productivity, increase efficiency, and obviously to be closer to the customer, understanding your customer and all that part has been the prime drivers apart from the profitability and the complexity. Now, the understanding of digitization is started somewhere around 2010-11 timeframe in different parts of the world, but it was more kind of an approach which was more towards automating different business processes rather than looking at it end to end. So what is that which is basically on the digitization part of it is that, it's basically automation plus integrating different processes, training people, and of course, there is a shift in the culture of the organization as well. And when I talk about digitization, one would strategize IT. And what I have done, I try strategizing IT with the core objectives of the organization, of the business, and also the underlying principles of a connected airline. So when I say connected airline, it is basically connecting all the, which is the aircraft, the airport, the customer, seamless integration in terms of data flow, in terms of dependency, which is there. So you sort it out. For example, if you're selling meals on board, it's not only about selling, you have to understand and also connect your catering processes, your settlement processes, your bank processes in terms of settling the payment, and of course, the core thing of the food being served and also having insight into the customer could have pre-ordered or what is his likes and dislikes and so on.
Absolutely. And taking cues from there, like you said, a few years ago, everything was mostly paper based and now it's digital. It's completely online. From what we have been observing, customer expectations have changed to volumes now. So considering that, from a leader's point of view, how or what are some changing fast, especially when we talk about digitally mature bits with Middle East context? What are airlines doing differently or what is this industry doing very differently?
I think if I look at Middle East today, it's very well matured market in terms of digitization across the board. It's not only within the airlines, it is through the government, different government processes, different government entities. You talk about it and it's there. And this is kind of very, very high end. And they also have a very supportive vision, I would say, for the future in terms of establishing, very high end data center, process all the data for AI, ML, and all that. And they have to a good extent, and they will self-sufficient going into the future. That's my take on this whole thing. And if you see this market from a digitization perspective, as I mentioned, I think our customers, now I'm coming to the aviation industries, our customers typically, different platforms, different solutions when it comes to whatever they have to get in terms of booking a ticket, booking a seat on the flight, transiting to the port, they expect the entire process to be digitized and available on there. I mean, gone are the days when, and I'll talk about an airline which I work for, and this was in Beyond. Although it being a luxury carrier, we had about more than 60% of our bookings happening through our online platform, through our airline online platform, not to the online travel agents or something. And that was primarily driven from this region, not so much from other parts of the world, but from the region. We flew only of two destinations, and that was contributing almost close to 75% of our total online booking. So you can imagine, what is the kind of expectation that the customer would have. So the pressure is more on us, I would say, the entities, be it airlines, be it airports, be it other providers. The pressure is on us to digitize every move of a customer, right from the time he books a ticket till the time he arrives at a particular airport. They even expect that the baggage belt numbers at the arrival typically is they receive it on their phone as a in-app notification or an SMS or whatever it is. That's besides the point. They wouldn't like to hunt around, look around for which baggage belt, or being told by the crew before they board the aircraft saying that, okay, your baggage is on belt number 15. No, they don't expect that. They wouldn't like it for that matter. Also, one more thing, what they expect is to a large extent of personalization. They would expect us as an airline, as a service provider, to understand their choices, to understand their wish list, to understand what would be their travel pattern, what are they looking at. So obviously that is paving the way in a big way, I would say, for us to adopt, emerging technologies like AI, ML, all that stuff for enabling our customers to understand them, to have a better insight. They're okay to probably, pay for higher fee, but they would have to see the value. And the way to demonstrate to them the value that we as an airline would provide would be the digital platform.
Absolutely. And, would it be safe to assume that AI here is kind of delivering the most measurable value today, be it operations, be it customer experience, elements of customer experience, or even revenue for that matter? Something as simple as getting notified about your baggage belt alert or, being pre-notified about these details. Is AI helping out here?
AI, my understanding of AI as it will be applicable in the aviation industry, let's put a couple of things here in perspective. Generative AI for the aviation industry is a bit of a risk. The reason is the business, in my view, is so complex, is so regulated, is driven by SOP, standard operating procedures, which are mandated by the regulator and so on and so forth. One might say, yeah, it is structured, so what's the big deal? But it's not about structuring. A small mistake which is done by AI model in terms of a generative AI can lead to a disaster. So what we as an industry can adapt is basically, agentic AI kind of platform where we will be able to automate a lot of tasks of the people, because in this part of the world, most of the airlines are growing rapidly and to the extent of about 30-35% year on year. And they have big targets, they have big, objectives that they will have to meet in a very short span of time. So growth is inevitable in this part of the world. And to drive this growth, we cannot be adding people as we grow, as simple as that. We will in the midst of a complex process. We cannot be doing repetitive jobs ever after. So agentic AI, if you're talking about AI, that's something which helps us to a good extent. The aviation industry, if you would have seen, there are a lot of chatbots which are there, and they adopt and train these LLMs that typically use for these chatbots. And these are, you can say, AI chatbots or whatever we can call them. People are transitioning from a normal transactional chatbot to a more of an AI chatbot, so that again, the customer wouldn't want to spend, huge amount of time in questions going up and down. Rather, they would have to be told, what they're looking at. And we, as the provider, we have to be sure of the customer insight to give him the right kind of response to whatever his queries are. So definitely LLMs and training the LLMs is very important. Obviously, everybody knows about it. But that is something these are the two areas that we are focusing on primarily.
Mr. Sinha, coming back to, your role as the Chief Information Officer, you have been as a CIO across different airline models, across different regions for that matter, right? From low cost, full service to a startup luxury as well. From your standpoint, how has the role of CIO today, they are wearing multiple hats, how has it evolved over the years? It's gone beyond the traditional technical decisions to a lot of, business decisions as well. How do you see this role?
At a global level, what I can see is that the technology teams that is my objective, has always been my objective, to position the technology teams as a co-entrepreneur to business rather than being an enabler. So all this while, till about 10 years back, it was more of an enabler. Enabler in the sense, okay, I have to design and deploy a certain system which will automate the process, will ensure the benefits that is generally associated with automating a particular process. Those were like standalone to a good extent, although they had some interfaces, but they were kind of standalone. But eventually what happened with digitization, and when I spoke about connected airline, it is something like you need to have holistic view. You need to build that ecosystem. You need to look at the business processes which needs to be engineered, re-engineered. You need to get people trained, not just using the system, but it's a shift in the culture. Innovation will come in a big way, be it related to linking different processes, re-engineering different processes, or even to the extent of automating different components, which have been like gray areas for that matter. I'll give you an example that, previously people were happy with implementing reservation system, which we call it as a passenger service system, a reservation system, and a departure control system. And there are some backend systems to ensure that whatever fares and pricing and etc. that we are providing the customer preferences, as well as in terms of the availability of seats on the particular flight. But now it's no more there. I mean, that was basically one way. Today, what happens is that you need to understand what the customer expecting. I mean, it has to be a personalized service. So as a CIO, you are not only looking at the implementation of that system and interfacing with certain other system in terms of data and all that stuff. What you also have to look is to understand the customer perspective, which would also include implementing certain technology solutions. I agree. But then again, it's an end-to-end view rather than, more focus towards a particular area. Secondly, the earlier the focus was also directed towards maintaining your IT infrastructure, means your data center. People had dedicated data center for their organization, for their airline. Eventually, we have started moving into the cloud over the last 8-10 years, or maybe slightly less than that. Now, that gives us a lot of leverage to the CIOs, in terms of turning their focus towards understanding the overall business, because that becomes a very important aspect, a very important quality on the success of a technology leader in an aviation industry, and for that matter, in every industry, perhaps. They are in terms of, managing the infrastructure, managing the network, the captive data centers are kind of going off from as a part of the responsibility. Yeah, I mean, even in the cloud, it doesn't mean that you forget about it, what you're putting in there, because other aspects related to the managing the cloud providers, managing your applications on the cloud, those things will come. But in terms of managing managing a physical facility used to take away a lot of time from, I have experienced myself. I mean, in some of the airlines that I work for, we had captive data centers. For everything you buy a storage, for everything you buy a new server, those headaches are gone. Today, it is more on demand, and the time to turn around becomes much less. So obviously, we have been fortunate from that point of view. But then the responsibility in terms of the business outcome, and that is very important for a CIO, he or she should understand the business outcomes of what he or she is doing. And he is part, as I said, he has to be a co-entrepreneur to business, which means he should participate in terms of building the landscape, building the ecosystem, training the people, re-engineering the business processes, and for which an in-depth business knowledge is mandatory. I mean, it's no more that, okay, yeah, I know or I don't know kind of thing.
Right, absolutely. So in that sense, from what I see today, for any modern CIO, the top priority would be to understand the business, be, with that strategic lens to kind of train and re-engineer everything. But any challenges or gaps from a leader's perspective that you have observed, perhaps the other side, the other side of running a business?
Let's first look at my backyard. I think, the mandate to my team has always been, and it is more in last few years, has been that, learn on your own. I mean, don't expect formal training program for you to learn because things are changing so rapidly. Okay. And it is only to our advantage as a technology team that you need to be one edge higher than your counterparts in other departments in terms of driving technology. Continuous learning, knowledge deficit can be disaster in the technology team. Okay. So this is one part of the game. The second part of the game is obviously there are some apprehensions from the business side. Now, as I was speaking, that if I put in an agentic AI, some people might think they might lose their job because that's what they are seeing in other parts of the world, in other industries. Okay. See, that is also education. One needs to tell them that, no, this is not a job that you will lose your job. Probably you have to get yourself trained. You have to uplift your knowledge base to do more value added activity. Number one. Number two, when they see, different tech companies, big tech companies laying off people, they also believe that, someday it will come to us. But the nature of business is very, very different. And here it's a business, as I said, which is driven to a good extent by experience. Okay. Good extent by experience because it's complex. It's regulated. I'm not saying the technology industry is not regulated, but they have been able to automate or using generative, because in terms of the repetitive kind of task that they do and we do, there is a difference. And secondly, also our team. So that is one part where there is a bit of apprehensions from their side. And as I said, there is a culture aspect as well. From a culture aspect, they should understand that, they should look at innovation. So the mindset should be, okay, let me try doing things. I should be doing things in a different way than I'm doing today. And I'm convinced that if I do it today, I can drive more efficiency for myself and for the organization as well. I'll give you an example. The engineering teams in a particular airline were not in favor of using kind of the digitization concept, and for reasons, whatever it is, I'm not getting into that. But once a simple app for recording certain things at the door of the aircraft was made available on their personal smartphones, initial implementation was difficult because for them to, be part of this whole thing. But once they got a taste of it, they were the guys who were driving it. They were telling us, okay, can you give us that function, this approval, that approval on this mobile app? Because they found that it is definitely becoming more easy for them. They are getting more empowerment in taking business because they had taking decisions, or because they had information of the things that they need to know before they take a decision. Previously, they had to go up to their supervisor or managers to get that approval or something. Today, he can do it on his mobile phone, his own smartphone. He found it to be very helpful for him. Yes, initial resistance was there because things were changing in terms of business process. Okay, you've been doing this way for all this while, but now going forward, this is the different way of doing it. Once you are able to overcome that, and that can happen with constant and continuous training. I'm not saying, is training in a classroom, but it's basically making them aware of the advantages. Yes, initial resistance to change is everywhere, but once you drive it, I have seen myself in my personal experience, then they are the people who start driving you.
Absolutely, rightly said so. And, again, with that context, what do you think will be the next global tech shift, especially when we talk about the aviation ecosystem? What will redefine this industry for the next 5 years, maybe, when we talk about innovation and sustainability at the same time?
I think Middle East has gone ahead with setting up a strong foundation very well, and they continue to do that and improve that on a daily basis. Number two is, from an aviation perspective, I think we can minimize the repetitive tasks to a great extent. Okay. Number three is it's easier said than done that, oh, I will do end-to-end digitization. an employee with technology on hand. And as I had mentioned during the start of this conversation, that we look at 4 or 5 perspectives. Eventually, what will happen is that is the internal part of it. So what we are doing there is that we are trying to provide all this end-to-end digitization technology in the hands of the last mile employees and so on and so forth. But that is mainly internal. Now, there is a lot of external parties who are involved, like your regulator. Today, yes, we have digitized the interaction with the regulators to a good extent, but there is still a lot of things has to be done. Number one. Number two is, for example, you fly from point A to B, but B to C, the last mile does not have a flight. But then you want this airline provider, the airline, to book you in another transport, maybe a train for that matter. And this is very common in parts of Europe. And in this part of the world, we have just started doing that as well. So that is multimodal transport. The third thing which would happen is today, when you buy a ticket, you are focused only on buying a ticket. And maybe if it's a low cost or, low fare kind of inventory that you're purchasing, you might buy some ancillaries as well. I would like to buy a seat with more leg space, window, this, that, and all that. You might like to order for some meals on board and so on and so forth. But those are typically restricted within what the airline is providing. Now, the obvious improvement on this, innovations which are going on, the new concepts which are coming, is what we are calling it as offer and order. Okay. Which means it is something like Amazon model, where a passenger will be able to buy a ticket, we will be able to buy kind of a merchandise, will be able to buy XYZ, whatever it is, a hotel, car, all under one identifier. So you have an order number. So you are offering this. And when you buy these components, it comes to you as an order. PNR will no longer be your identifier. It will be your order number, which will be your identifier. What it helps, if you change your flight, automatically other things gets changed as well. Number two is that today, these post-transaction settlements,
right,
which means, it's a big challenge.
Right.
Our finance team will have to remember, will have to get document one from one service provider, document two from another service provider, link it to a particular ticket or a PNR or whatever it is. This would become seamless under offer and order. So in the next 4 to 5 years, you will see that this current concept of just buying a ticket and then they push you to booking.com site, or they push you to a Hertz site or renting car, or they push you to that concept will go away. So for a customer, he gets to buy everything and anything for his travel. You want to buy services of a tour guide? Why not? Okay. So that is where the customer centricity is going in the aviation industry. We are in a phase of transition from the traditional way to this modern way of doing it. And it links everything, right from the offer that the airline make to the customer, to the order that is generated after you choose, to the service delivery that is happening by the respective service providers, and then of course the settlement at the back. So all these processes will be totally integrated over a period, I would say, imagine 4 or 5 years. The other thing which will also happen, it has started happening, and but it will be on a more global level. I would tend to believe that different countries will be able to exchange data and information is in your immigration and security process. Immigration process, as when you come in here to any port of Saudi Arabia, you will find e-gates, okay, so which is biometric, and this has been going on for quite some time. But eventually, I believe that, for example, it will basically now be kind of standardized. Today, it is not standardized, okay, across different ports, across different countries. Maybe within the same country, it is standardized, but not across different countries. I think that integration will have to happen sooner than later.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, Mr. Sinha, and giving us a glimpse of what the industry is going to look like when we talk about innovation for the next 5 years. While we wrap up this dialogue, I most certainly look forward to having more such conversations with you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.